Thank you, snowboarding.
Thank you,
snowboarding.
Snowboarding.
Hey friends, happy new year. Welcome back to Thank You Snowboarding, the podcast looking at and diving into all aspects of UK snowboarding culture, from the pioneers hand building boards up in Scotland to our current crop of young shredders, all getting ready for the Lax Open to show the world what a small island in the North Atlantic can do on a snowboard. So yeah, happy new year. I hope you're all well. I hope this finds you well. I hope you've survived the Christmas festive period. Yeah, quite a bit of work my end, I would say, but I'm survived and we are back. Looks like snow has been falling in the Alps. Seen some shots from Dragon Lodge. Looks like Will has been getting amongst it. Will Hughes from a few episodes ago. If you haven't listened to that, then go back and check that out. Yes, I hope wherever you are either just back from a trip or planning a trip or basically getting frothing for snowboarding. We are supported by our good friends at the Snowboard Asylum, who have been looking after snowboarders for the last 35 years and will look after you too. I've been rambling on about having comfy boots, and they are the people to go to if you need kit for this season or any season. If you're going away, go pay them a visit. And if not them, at least go and pay your local snowboard shop a visit if you are lucky enough to still have one. These guys are the lifeblood of our scene and they need supporting. So yeah, lifeblood of our scene. This brings us very nicely to my guest this week, the lovely Maria Cork. Now, you might well not have known about Maria. She was a dryslope stalwart. She was at everything. She used to win the occasional competition, but she was in it for life and still is in it for life. I hadn't seen Maria for quite a few years when I was sat with my kids watching a documentary about the latest 3 Star Wars films, the sequels, and sitting there watching it at home with my kids, and up pops Maria. And it turns out, and I kind of knew that she had something to do with special effects, but it turns out that she is quite the mover and shaker in the sort of VFX world. And my kids were stoked. They were like, wow, you know someone that works on the Star Wars films. And then I think that Christmas she posted a picture on Instagram of her stood next to Chewbacca. Now, as a proper Star Wars nerd, that floated my boat. There was once during lockdown where we did a pub quiz over Zoom, and my round was the Star Wars round, and none of my friends got any of the answers to any of the questions, which I thought were fairly common knowledge, but turns out my knowledge of Star Wars goes a bit deeper, and my kids know even more than I do. So yeah, we're proper Star Wars nerds. So that put Maria back on my radar. We saw her at I guess it would have been 5 years ago at the Snowboard Asylums. They did a thing at the House of Vans as a celebration of their 30th birthday, and I remember seeing her there, and I think I'd just seen this documentary and I was like, oh, you know, my kids think you're so cool. And anyway, Maria's one of the nicest people you could hope to meet, and we sort of vaguely in touch since then, and I thought she'd be a great guest to have on the podcast, not only because she's sort of killing it at her chosen profession, but she also was just basically at every snowboard event for a long time, every dry slope, every British champs. She was just a real solid part of the snowboard community, and I think that is to be celebrated. So let's get to it. There's a couple of bits in this interview where I interject. I lost about the last 20 minutes due to my laptop failing. Again, the failing laptop, but don't worry, I'm sorting that out. So it kind of jumps a little bit, and there's a bit where I forget the name of a dry slope, which I will jump in on as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this one. A really fun chat. We went and had a dip in. Maria came down to my house. We went and had a swim in the sea beforehand. We recorded this back in, I guess, September, October time. So we went and had a swim in the sea, had a cheese toastie, and then sat down for an hour in my studio and had a chat about old times and what she's up to now. So I hope you enjoy this one. This is Maria Cork. I mean, you were at every dry slope thing for longer than I was. I mean, I don't know that I lived in the dry slope scene for that long, because my first real experience was doing a season. I'd sort of done it a bit on dry slope where I worked, and then I went and did a season. So the mountains were always calling to me. Dry slope was like a thing to do whilst I wasn't in the mountains. But like for like 3 or 4 years, I was definitely part of that whole thing. Like 3 or 4 times a week. And obviously meeting you at Hillingdon. But how was your sort of entry point into snowboarding? Where did you see it?
I was working at Jim Hensons Creature Shop in Camden, and me and my friend Chrissy went halves and bought... Actually, no, that must have been later. Just trying to think when I first went. I think it was me and my friend Duncan.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Jim Hensons Creature Shop.
Yeah. That was one of my first jobs when I was about 19. I was the runner, so I was in the van going and buying all the equipment, driving around London, going to John Lewis.
That? Just as an interest, like I'm just generally interested how people get their foot indoors with these things.
So I knew I wanted to work in creature effects since I was about 14. I used to watch horror films. I was obsessed with all those things, and I knew I wanted to make monsters. And that drive was with me from a young age, which was great. And
I watched Nightmare on Elm Street when I was too young.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have done that. It scared the shit out of me so bad that I don't think I could. I still can't watch horror movies. They have no joy in for me.
So I was the opposite. I watched them and was like, I think at that age I was figuring things out. I was like, oh, I can see how they did that. Watched Friday the 13th and was like, oh, Kevin Bacon's lying in the bed and that's his body's at an angle and that's how they've got the knife and they've done this. And I was figuring these things out, and that was what got me going, I could make this. And I was playing around with makeup when I was about 14, 15 at school, doing slit wrists on friends to scare the teachers. And that was my way in, and I knew I wanted to do it. So I never went to university. As soon as I'd finished college, I basically got the job as a runner on a TV show called, it was Space Precinct was the first thing I worked on. Jerry Anderson, Cops in Space.
Precinct, yeah.
That was Shepperton and Pinewood. So I was working there. Then I started as a production runner on a TV show and managed to get the job as the runner at Hensons off the back of that.
No way.
So I spent a lot of my teenage years working in Camden, which was great.
Yeah.
And it was then that I think I used to drive past Hillingdon on my way to Camden. I'd go in on the M40.
Yeah.
And I'd see it there on the way home, and I was fascinated. And I'd always kind of done various sports. I'd been a figure skater when I was younger. And then I'd done gymnastics, but was rubbish at that because I'm 6'2" and my arms weren't strong enough, and I just kept landing on my head and doing stupid things. And then I looked at that, I was like, I'm going to do that. So the first time, I think me and my friend Duncan were working around that area and went to Hillingdon Dry Slope. And I seem to remember my first lesson was in hard boots. Yeah. It was back at that point where you had your beginner's lessons, they'd give you the hard boots for that.
And ski boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So had a few lessons with that, and that was when I met Rob and all of those guys, Rob Needham and the whole Hillingdon Mafia group, and I became obsessed. And that was when me and my friend Chrissy went 50-50 on a snowboard that we shared.
What did you buy?
K2. It was in a tiny little skate shop in Camden that had one snowboard for sale. We didn't think about it, didn't look into it, just went, yeah, we'll have that. 50-50. Bought that. Didn't have any boots or anything else at that point. Right. And I think I bought my first boots off Schmitty. Really knackered old, not waterproof. I think they were Northwave. They were so squidgy and soggy that I could drive home in them. I didn't have to change my shoes to drive home. They were that comfortable.
Oh, Northwaves. I mean, actually, those trainers, you know, the ones that look like the boots.
Yeah.
They're coming back this year.
Nice. Well, I had the boots that acted like trainers, so I could just finish snowboarding, get straight in the car, drive home, because they weren't solid or stiff in any way at all.
No, I had a pair of them.
They were great. So that was the startings of it. And then, with Rob around, I only had a few lessons and then just started going down there all the time. And I can't remember, I must have started going to the freestyle sessions, which would have been once a week at the weekend, I'm sure, and they get all the ramps out. And
Sunday nights, I seem to remember.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And just started doing all of that, and then within a couple of years started doing all the dry slope comps at that point.
Paint a picture of Hillingdon, because Hillingdon became, I'd say that there were probably 2 places in the UK that started to become like quite heavy scenes, like Progression, and that would have been, oh fuck me, what's the place up north? Place where like Stu and Steve and everyone used to go.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Oh, I can't remember.
Not the one in the lake, not Kendal. Or
No, it's not Kendal.
Hill End up in Edinburgh. I'm not sure.
No, it's blank. Early onset, I reckon.
I'm definitely suffering from that.
There's probably people when they listen to it, they'll be shouting at their phones.
Probably.
Quick editor's note. I remembered later that the dry slope was, of course, Rosendale. Sorry to all you Rosendale locals out there. You did some amazing things, and not least that Steve Bailey 900 that I think I posted on the Instagram recently. Back to the interview. But yeah, certainly there in Hillingdon seemed like, when I sort of came into it, it definitely seemed that those 2 places were responsible for like heavy scenes. People really, really trying to get good.
It was the people who were there, and it was that encouragement. I just remember it being really friendly, and if you're going to try things out, it was at a point where you didn't get coaching. There was nobody there going, right, what you need to do is you need to go off your toe edge and do that. It was just everyone else who might have figured it out already, something you were trying to do, telling you their way of doing it, and everyone was really encouraging. I remember that. It was you against you. That's the whole thing with the dry slope competitions. It wasn't about winning anything. It was just like, I nailed a 360. I'm so happy, and that was all you cared about. Still came second to last, but that didn't matter.
But Hillingdon seemed to have, I mean, as you say, it was friendly. It seemed to be quite a tight scene and fairly brutal as well. Like, those guys took no prisoners.
I don't know, because I was probably, once I was a part of that, you don't notice so much.
Right.
But I had a lot of friends, because I used to skateboard around that time as well, and I had a lot of friends who were BMXers as well. And I remember some of the BMXers coming down, and they didn't want to snowboard, but they'd get the rubber tyres out and just go flying down the hill and over the jumps on that. So there was always the stupid element as well.
Yeah.
That we're not taking this seriously. We're going to take the trikes out and try and go over the jumps on that, and we're going to just be ridiculous. And I think that was all led by Rob as well. He was never taking anything seriously. It was all about having fun. And we'd go to the skate park. We'd all go skating at Hayes a lot around that time, which had a really good indoor skate park with a vert ramp and a lovely mini ramp and a whole street course. And Rob had built this thing, I think he called it the EM squared. It was basically a cut down snowboard with trucks and bindings. So you could go on the vert ramp effectively on a miniature snowboard that you were strapped to. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Did you do that?
Yeah, a lot.
Really?
It was great fun. But
Sounds
and
fucking terrifying.
Joe Rackley and Duncan Carr and everyone was skating at that point. And it was all just, I don't know, maybe it was really tight-knit, maybe it was difficult for people to get in, but it didn't feel like that from where I was. It was just fun. Loads of fun.
They put out a publication, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Rob about this, called Oh for the Smell of It, which was I mean, I think everyone would be there's no way you could put that into the world now, because it was gloriously funny, but so out of order in so many ways.
Yeah.
I don't even know that I can mention in some of the ways it was out of order. But I mean, to be part of that and not to feel as if you're being offended by it. I mean, there weren't many girls in the scene.
Not tons, no. I think I met more girls once the dry slope comp started, because I think most of the other females that I knew were at different slopes. Yeah. There was always Sonic, Anna, and Faye Greenway. I started meeting later on. I started going up to Tamworth every Saturday. Yeah. That was another period of realising that I would drive all the way up to Tamworth, get there first, put the ramp out, stay till the very end, put the ramp away and get free riding. But that's, from where I lived in Shepperton, getting up to Tamworth, that was a massive effort. I look at that now and I'm driving home at 1 a.m, 2 a.m.
Was that the Saturday nights?
Yeah.
Because me and Dave did that a few times, and he'd fall asleep on the way home, and I'd be like, I'm doing a 4-hour journey back from Tamworth to Dartford.
Yeah.
At 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night.
I did that every week for a long time. And I'd go to friends' parties and they'd be like, oh yeah, no, we're having a party here. I was like, well, I've got to go at 7 o'clock, so I've got to go snowboarding, and I'll be back at 1. And I'd just jump in the car, go riding and come back and then carry on in the party. It's bizarre times. I think you don't need as much sleep when you're young and it doesn't matter. It's fine.
No. But what was it at that time that was sort of motivating you? Because you were as much part of the scene as anyone else, and you were you would see you everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, there's a thing. You were there. You know, you were one of the dependable people that you would see everywhere.
I just enjoyed it. That's the reality of it. And I'm somebody who's always collected hobbies and does things, but if I enjoy it, I will keep doing it. And I didn't have a problem at all with driving 4 or 5 hours up to Sheffield, do the comp, sleep in the car. That's one thing I always remember with the dry slope comps, was driving up the night before the competition and just sleeping in the driver's seat of the car. You couldn't get your seat right down flat, so you're kind of in this awkward position, wake up to do the competition with every muscle aching because you haven't had a good night's sleep, and just doing it. And that was fine, and I didn't have a problem with that. Again, youth. Loved it.
Youth and alcohol?
There would normally be, so again, the night after the competition, when that had finished, you'd all get pretty drunk and again sleep in the car. You're not going to pay for hotels, not when you're 19 to 24. You just sleep in the car and then drive home the next day. Because
it seemed to be at the time like a group of people who were entirely obsessive.
Yeah.
And the whole, this whole scene as an industry and riders and associated people, it just seemed to be really tight. Like, I often wonder how welcoming if you were in it, it was great, but I wonder if it was at all welcoming to those people who thought, I fancy going to have a look at snowboarding, or whether it was actually quite a nice little unit to be in, because everybody seemed to be obsessive about it. It was their life. And it was pretty, it was pretty hard sort of socially, like it was pretty boozy, and I'm guessing a lot of people were using booze as a way to kind of feel more comfortable in a room full of people. Certainly I felt
quite
like
probably
that.
Yeah,
and it seemed to suit that whole thing, so it was fine. I think that was a part of it that I really liked.
I think I always remember Wickham being some of the hardest weekends, because there'd be the whole weekend and they did have a field over the road so you could properly set up camp. And as a result of that would be riding, and then the partying went on really late, and that was hilarious. I've seen some footage from that. It must have been Rad that did a little piece on the British champs one year, the dry slope comp at Wickham. And I think Russ put it up again recently, and I was watching it and it's so funny. Took me right back. We're all board across on a dry slope. I mean, how ridiculous is that as a concept?
Is that the one you won? I think I watched that.
I think I fell at the last minute. I did a stupid showboat or something and fell before I hit the line. I can't quite remember, but...
Is it Frieden, the one who did that in the Olympics?
Yeah.
The UK version.
That was so funny. But no, that was a ridiculous one, because I think that was a whole weekend, and they'd get the trampoline out with the snowboards with the edges taken off and gaffer tape over so you could take them on the trampolines. They had a really good scene there for the comps. They were always really good. And I think there was a point when Hillingdon, we all moved up to Hemel Hempstead. I can't quite remember if it was precisely because Hillingdon closed or whether it just migrated up there for other reasons. But the whole of the Hillingdon group all moved pretty much up to Hemel Hempstead when it was still a dry slope, not when it was a snow dome.
Yeah, I think that must have been when I'd sort of moved out of the dry slope scene, I think, because I think I went there once for a Morrow Jam.
Yes. And that was the annual, the Morrow Jam every year was the big one. And that was when Rob would get creative with building like massive quarter pipes at the bottom of the slope and all sorts of nonsense. They were really good fun.
Well, tell me more about, because I didn't really get too involved in that sort of thing, and I certainly didn't hang out at Hillingdon. Well, actually, no, I don't want to go there. I want to go because you did some seasons, didn't you? Or at least one. I
did. First season I did was in Val d'Isère, staying in a house with loads of others. And I lucked out in that I managed to save enough money that I wasn't working.
Yeah.
I've never done a season as a chalet maid or working anywhere. I saved up enough to pay the rent, buy the lift pass, and live on pasta for a whole
Who did you live
season.
with?
Will Young and Juliet and
Will Young.
so sorry, my name. I tell you,
Fucking
early
Will
onset.
Young.
Ignore that one. Will Hughes
Will
and
Hughes.
Juliet and Dan Line. There was about 9 or 10 of us in the house, I think, at one point.
I've got a feeling that I was supposed to live there
Oh, really?
because I was gonna. I can't remember who I'd sorted it out with. I was supposed to be doing a season in Val. I did my first season in Val, and I was going to go back, but my brother was in Borg, and I sort of stopped there for a couple of days on the way, and then I was just like, it's really cheap.
Definitely.
I might just stay, and there's a good crew. I might just stay here. And I think I may have ended up living with you in Val, should that had that in an alternative life.
I remember that halfway through that season, I kind of started spending more and more time over in Teen.
Right.
Probably once the park had set up, because Val didn't really have a park at that time. And I started seeing a guy who lived in Teen, so I was spending more time staying with him and just riding the park. And I think that was where my obsession with that side of things came from, because I wasn't as much of a free rider as I was. Find me a jump that remained the same size every time I hit it. Like, I loved hips at that point, and I was much happier in the parks over there. So I spent a lot of the rest of the later point in the season over there.
Teens are just more open, isn't it? Val's just hasn't got a good place for a park.
No. And sadly. I went back there a while ago and I thought I'd recognise more of it than I did. It's kind of weird. You think that landscape, because you'd spent 6 months just riding it solidly, would be completely in there. And I remember bits of it, but I still kind of got lost and was like, don't remember that. And maybe it's changed, but I think it's probably just my memory.
I remember, so I did a season there straight out of A-levels in 93, 94. And it must have been while we were in Borg at some point, however many years later. Went up there and just didn't even recognise the town. Yeah. Changed so much.
No, definitely.
And I've not ridden up there. So I'm hoping to get out there this winter. I'd like to revisit and just have a cruise around and see what... Because I just can't remember what was good and what was bad. We just did the same thing quite a lot over and over. And obviously there was the partying. And I think that might have been a reason why I didn't go back sort of for that season, where it might have been living with you guys, just because I think I was like, I don't want to do that much partying. Yeah. I think... And be out at the Petit Damois and...
Ramsky's was the bar at the time. Ramsky's.
That wasn't there on my first season.
I always remember, the one thing I totally remember from Val d'Isère was the Foonie run. Get the first lift up, because our house was near that end of town, so you could go to the funicular, first lift up, take the men's downhill run, try and beat it down to get the second lift up. Yeah. And I don't think I ever managed it, but that fresh corduroy on a good day when it hadn't got too icy, knowing there's nobody else on the hill because you've taken the first lift up, meaning you could just tank it round corners knowing you're not going to hit anyone. Yeah. That was some of my favourite things to do, because it was just completely flat. You really just felt that was so much fun.
One of my overarching memories of Val is being up at the Fournay end. Yeah. Like, you know, we never used to go up there, but I think towards the end of the season there was a really shitty weather day. And it was like, oh, let's go and hit the trees at the Fournay. And it was amazing. I remember feeling like this must be what being in a snowboard movie feels like. Like, the powder was good, the trees are nicely spaced, and everything just clicked in. Yeah. And then there's another point where you're stood up on the sort of the highest point over at that end, and you're looking into Italy and beyond. Yes. And I just remember thinking, like, how amazed. Like, I'm now just thinking about it, I'm getting the goosebumps of that new horizons and distance and new worlds. And it's like, fucking, because if that's Italy, then you follow that and then you get to Africa, and, you know, there's the gateway to the world. And I'm stood at this high point where you can see it all. And and so they're like my overarching memories of Val d'Isère. Like, there was a lot of, obviously, going to Dick's and going to playback and being pissed. Yeah, a lot of that. But, like, my favourite memories are the ones where it's just like, I've come from Dartford and I'm now in places like this. How fucking cool is this? Those moments when you're just right at the top of a hill, like you say, those panoramas. I did one recently. I was working in Spain, in Granada, and I took my snowboard out and everyone was laughing at me. But there's one mountain, the Sierra Nevada, right in Granada, in the bottom of Spain. And I had a day snowboarding up there just on my own, went right up to the top. And from the top there, you are looking over Africa.
You see Gibraltar, you're looking across the Gibraltar Strait at Morocco.
No way.
In the mountains in the bottom of Spain. And that just blew my mind. It was incredible. Just that view, looking across there to the Sahara. Yeah.
And where your snowboard might take you as well.
Yeah.
Like all the places and all the people that you meet, and it's basically your snowboard that's taking you there.
Absolutely. I had after the season in Val d'Isère, I spent a couple of seasons I've always been a traveller, and I did a lot of round the world travelling when I was 19, 20, probably before I'd properly been doing the snowboarding. And I did 2 seasons, 2 years in a row, where I'd do some travelling and take the snowboard. So I'd do kind of Seattle, and spent a bit of time in Colorado and bits and pieces. And I spent quite a bit of time in Vail, because that was when Tim Warwood and his brother Andy were out there, and Johnny Roderick, all of those guys. So I did 1 season where I was just travelling around and spent a bit of time in different places, and then ended up in Vancouver as well. And that was when I think Tim was doing a season in...
Whistler?
Yeah, it was when they were up at Whistler. So I kind of travel around and stay with different people.
My brother would have been out there. I think he was there when Tim was there as well.
I can't remember. This is how bad my memory's got. I can't remember the order of it, but I did 1 season where I just travelled around and spent a bit of time in Vail, a bit of time in Seattle, and then a bit of time in Vancouver. And I think it was the next year I went, no, Vail was brilliant. Because at that point I'd become obsessed with half pipe. Right. And they had that amazing run in Vail where you just take the chair up, you get off the chair halfway, you've got the half pipe, you've got a few jumps, you've got the rails, you've got a few more jumps, and you're literally at the bottom. So I would literally just do laps of that. That was me happy. Sick. I became obsessed with half pipe at that point.
So that would have been probably, was that after sort of dry slope?
Yeah, it was. My career took over. I never took snowboarding that seriously later on. I'd always go to the Brits every year because that was always good fun. And I'd enter the half pipe. And I used to enter border cross as well, but I was never very good at that. Slope style, never. Big jumps, I was never particularly good at. But half pipe, I loved. But there was a point when work became more serious and I was getting into my career. And I started getting scared of hurting myself, because hurting my wrists put me out of a job, because I was all making things. That was my job, is making stuff. So I started...
dry slopes are fucking hazard for your hands.
Yeah, I think that point, after doing the season in Vail, I think that was the end of dry slope. I was kind of like, I don't need to do that. But I would go out to the Brits. That was at the point when they used to be... There was several years in... There was one in Saas-Fee, and then there were several years in Lax, and there was Meyerhofen.
Dessau.
I don't think I've ever been to Dessau. I don't think I did that one. And then there was the one in Teen, and then there was a later one in Teen as well, where we had the X Games half pipe for the half pipe comp. That was much later, when I was in the Masters category, all the old people. I'm now in the Legends category. I went to the Brits last year in Cairngorm, and I'm in the Legends category for the over 40s. Give it 2 years, we're going to need to invent a new category.
There's got to be a new category coming in soon.
There's got to be one for the over 50s. We need a category. Come on.
You know, like the guys at Wimbledon, where they do, and they're just like pissing around and knocking shots at each other and teeing people up for stuff. That's what that needs to be like.
Yeah.
Thing is, it's going to probably be the most populated category at the competition.
Bank slalom and border cross are going to be, that's going to be, all the over 50s are going to kill it, definitely.
What I'm really interested in seeing is who's still got the competitive spirit, who still wants to win.
Yeah. Like
you mentioned Tim, he definitely wants to win.
He was up at the bank slalom in Cairngorm. He gives it the,
definitely. You know, like, I'm Tim, funny guy. He wants to win, like
definitely.
No one's business.
I didn't think I would. I went up just because I thought it was going to be really fun, and it was just like a bank slalom. I'd never had a chance to do one of them. I missed the early days of competition where that was the norm.
Yeah.
So for me, this was, okay, I can have a go at this. It wasn't until I got there I was like, no, I really want to do well. Of course, I was never going to beat Leslie. That was never going to happen.
No one's ever beaten Leslie.
You know, that's part of going to the Brits, is coming second to Leslie would be my goal. Normally that didn't happen and I'd come further down the field, but you know, the absolute goal is silver.
Silver's the new gold.
Absolutely. When Leslie's competing, it is for sure.
Shout out to Leslie, obviously.
Absolutely. I had loads of fun up in Cairngorm with those guys. Hope it happens up there again. That was really good fun.
I don't know that it will until they sort the funicular out. The big news when I was up there is that the funicular's fucked.
Oh, no.
And they can't really... So me and Johnny Barr, you have to walk up, you drive up, and then you've got to like walk up to the first lift, which it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely a bit of work.
Right.
Trying to organise, like a infrastructure around that must be a real pain in the arse.
Yeah, they must be like that funicular's so useful.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't.
It's just going to cost loads and loads of money. And everyone was talking about it. It was quite weird. That was the subject of conversation that everybody had.
Right.
And wanted to tell you about. And everyone's got a different take on why it's not working, how much it's going to cost, and if it's ever going to get fixed.
Gotcha.
It was quite fascinating. I
bet.
learned a lot in a short space of time. That was my first trip up there, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's embarrassing to say that in spite of all of my snowboarding stuff, I'd never ridden in Scotland. Like, throughout that whole time. It's like, why hadn't I done that? Because I went up there and I was like, okay, only by the time we had the Brits up there, they were only the top few runs going. You couldn't run right down to the bottom because there wasn't enough snow.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful up there.
Isn't it, Jeff?
And it's like, people are going, oh, it's small. It's 4 times bigger than Tamworth, even when only the top section's open. And we used to drive 3 hours just to go riding in Tamworth.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, we scored it. Me and Johnny Barr had powder turns.
Amazing.
And it's like, who thought this would ever happen? But yeah, I scored it lucky. Shout out to Jeremy Sladen as well for taking me up there. But yeah, we scored it.
Amazing.
And who'd have thought? It was brilliant. And as good as anywhere else. If the conditions are good, anywhere it's good.
Yep, absolutely. And it was beautiful when we were up there the other year. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the competitive side of it, apart from the Brits where I'd just go and compete in the old category, I never had that massive competitive streak in me, and I never got that good. I never pushed myself super hard. I just enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah. And
when my career started to take off, I just got scared of hurting myself, and the snowboarding just drifted out. And like I said earlier, I collect hobbies, so other things kind of became interesting, and I'd start doing them, and I was doing more music stuff, and there's just not enough hours in the day once your career starts working, especially when you're in the film industry, because that's, you're getting up at 6 a.m. and you're not getting home till 8 p.m. sometimes, so there's no time for hobbies at that point.
But just, it seems, I mean, have you managed to keep going snowboarding?
Not
like, do you have a place for it in your life?
I do love it. I went up to Hemel, now it's a snow dome, a while ago. I haven't done it that much. But again, I'm just scared of hurting myself more now than I thought I would be. Yeah. Ask 25-year-old me, and she'd be like, don't be ridiculous. Of course you're going to still be doing it. But I do still love it when I do get out there. And I did the Hemel Hempstead Tuesday night that Rob does a lot of work at. They do a trip to Andorra. And I did that maybe 3-4 years ago for a week and had a brilliant time. Yeah. It was lovely just riding around. And that's the thing. You still get as much pleasure from just spending a day on the slopes, just bimbling around. It's still as much fun as it ever was. Yeah, I think so. I don't think that initial kind of I'm strapping in, like this is all good. Yeah. I'm strapping in, how lucky am I to have this, is still as strong and maybe stronger than it ever was. Yeah. Because you realise what a cost, what it takes out of your life to be able to go and do that thing now. Whereas it used to be that you could, get a few grand together and go and do a season. Yeah. Which I appreciate for some people, getting a few grand together is difficult, but you used to be able to do it, and that would give you 5 months of fucking fun. But I wonder how much that would do if you were to do what I did that first year and do a season without working. I dare to think how much that would cost you now just to be able to do that, because I'm sure rent prices are crazy. And well, from my own experience, obviously we had the business out there till 10 years ago. Yeah. It would seem that nobody does it. Everybody turns up with a job. Right. And people do jobs and then fit in snowboarding around their jobs. Yep. So that whole culture's changed, and I do wonder what impact that does have on, the sort of future of it. Because it used to just be something that was a goal in itself, whereas now it's like, oh, I'm working abroad and I'm going snowboarding. Yeah. There's no just like, I'm going snowboarding. I'm so obsessed, I just have to go and do this as much as possible. That was an absolute luxury to be able to spend that much time just riding.
Yeah.
every day. That was incredible.
It's quite interesting that, you obviously had this other thing that you must have been obsessive about, and I'm assuming that you are obsessive about it because you've made an extremely what would look an extremely successful career. It's hard for me to know what a success is, but to have those two sort of things that you must have been obsessive running concurrently.
Yeah.
Because I know that when I'm all in on one thing, everything else is out the window.
I've always had several things. The career's always come first. Even when I was snowboarding, the career was still focused. I did take a year off to do the snowboarding, that first season. I did do a lot of travelling. But then from sort of mid-20s, career became everything. And it's a fun job. Anyone who's listening who doesn't know me, I work in the film industry doing creature effects. So what's not to love? This is a dream job of making monsters for a living, effectively.
I mean, I think I knew it's like, she does something with puppetry. And I think I sort of roughly knew what you did.
Yeah.
But then when I said to you, like when I saw you at that House of Vans thing, like watching one of the behind the scenes things about the new Star Wars movies with the kids. And then there you are with fucking Chewbacca. And I'm like, that's Maria. Let's go snowboarding with her. And my kids are all of a sudden like, fucking hell, you're cool because you know her and she's with Chewbacca. Like, that must by association.
I'm glad to have given you cool points.
Oh, no, for a very short period of time. They were like, wow, that's amazing. And so, yeah, it would seem, like from a bystander's point of view, like to be working on those projects at that level, clearly you have achieved an awful lot.
Yeah,
since your snowboarding days.
I'm very lucky in that I have made a career out of the thing that I've always loved.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something that a lot of people strive for and don't manage, but I did put the hours in and worked really hard.
Yeah.
When we were doing the Star Wars film, so I spent 6 years working on the 5 films, and that was everything. I had no social life outside that because we were filming and building, and I'd often be working late all the time and Saturdays. And then when you're filming, you're either abroad or quite often the filming would be 6-day weeks by default as well.
Yeah.
So there was no life outside that for that period. And the pressure of that as well. Our department, basically what I do is within the creature effects department is hair, fur and feather work on creatures. So it's really specific and really...
That's a niche.
It is really niche. So that's why we ended up like, we need to figure out how to build Chewbacca. Yeah. And you don't want to mess that one up. Like, this is a really beloved character.
Everyone
you
knows
do
what
not
Chewbacca looks
want to
like.
be the department that come out. It's like, yeah, they really screwed that one up. That pressure was there for 6 years, and that feeling in the back of your head. So that it was tough time on that one, but I loved every minute of it as well. We got to go to some amazing places. We were in Iceland filming on the top of, I'm going to try and say it right, Eyjafjallajökull, which was the volcano that erupted with the cloud.
Oh, that one.
Years after that, we were filming on that with
I can tell you exactly
Chewbacca.
where I was when that happened.
I was in America. We got stuck. We couldn't get home. We were stuck in Dallas, Fort Worth, and all the locals were calling us volcano victims. We were stuck on holiday. I didn't feel like a victim at all.
No, well, we had the chalet. We were doing the chalet, and guests couldn't go home because they couldn't get a flight. And I can picture exactly the image of where I am when someone said there's a volcano and we can't fly home.
Yeah,
it's like there's a volcano in Iceland and you can't fly home.
It was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then, there's been other volcanoes erupting all over. We've never seen the likes of that. That was such a bizarre thing, and I missed the whole thing from the European perspective because I was stuck in Texas.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So during all that time when you were working on Star Wars, did you get away?
Only with work, mostly. We did have some amazing location work. And when you go out as a team, the creature effects department could have been sometimes up to 30 or 40 of us travelling abroad.
Yeah.
To do these big scenes and dressing people up and all the puppeteers and the creature suit performers. We had trips to Iceland, Fuerteventura. Some of the guys went out to Abu Dhabi. We did some work in Jordan. We got some amazing trips. And
did
these
you ever
are
end
always
up in any places where it's like, shit, I could get a snowboard for a couple of days? And
we did end up in Italy in the Dolomites. And I did think about it, and we literally, and of course it's why we were filming at that point. We were filming the week after the lifts closed, because obviously all the hotels are empty.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper to get everyone's accommodation.
Yeah.
I got really excited at the idea of snowboarding. We literally showed up the week after. So no,
shit.
Never managed to get the snowboarding in with it, but we had some good trips. And then I think when we were filming solo, there was a point, because that ended up being a 9-month shoot, which is unheard of, because they ended up getting rid of the original directors halfway through and bringing in Ron Howard to finish. And we ended up having to film a lot of it again because of that, to make sure that they got everything they needed. So we filmed for months and months. And that period when they were organising the new director, everybody had an enforced 3 weeks off, knowing you were coming back to paid work.
Brilliant.
The entire crew scattered all over the world.
That's a freelancer's dream.
It was. Like, you've got 3 weeks off and you're coming back to work. Everyone just scattered. There was like stories of people going up to Mexico. I think me and Jake went to Sorrento in Italy and just had some time down there. It was great. But there was a lot of overlapping between the films. You'd finished building, like we finished episode 7, started building Rogue One, and as soon as we'd finished building stuff for Rogue One, while they were filming that, we were starting to build stuff for episode 8. It all overlapped. So no, it was pretty full on. Did get a few holidays, but mostly that was just work.
Do you ever think, like, I want to go snowboarding, but actually there's a risk element that if I injure myself, I'm going to be screwed for work?
Very much.
I mean, obviously at the dry slope time, that's a very real thing because of Dendex and fingers and wrists. But like, just that, I'd like to go snowboarding out in the Alps or whatever, but there is that idea that I might hurt myself, and it would be, as you say, it might be easier to go to Sorrento and just have a nice time.
Just
and
sit
So another editor's note. This is where my laptop gave up, and then we did reconvene the interview over Zoom a couple of months later. And we do kind of get back to this subject on the freelancers, but we also drift all over the shop. So let's go again. Maria Cork. Funnily enough, listening to our conversation from before, and I was saying, oh yeah, you know, hopefully I'm going to go to team. We were talking about Val d'Isère, and it was really, she was quite a lot of emotions for me going back and riding, you know, sort of going to the top of the Belvard and doing that run down and all that sort of stuff. Because I've not ridden there since I did that season. I've ridden over on the teen side, but I've never gone back over to the Val d'Isère side. And like the Grand Prix chairlift, where the gully underneath it that you just used to session all the time. Like we used to just ride that all the time because hits would form. And I was just thinking a lot about like the 19-year-old version of me who turned up there with no idea what he was doing, with hardly any money, and just made it work.
Yeah,
and then,
that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, like the 19-year-old version of me might have been the best version of me, because wasn't worried about sort of, you know, didn't even think about sponsorship or anything like that. Was just generally 100% stoked to be in the mountains. I had a snowboard under my arm. We figured out a job, so I didn't have to worry about dying, essentially. Like we had somewhere to sleep and food and a lift pass.
Yeah.
And that was it. That's all we, you know, it's all we needed. And I just think, you know, I was like, actually, I'm normally quite sort of down on myself, but actually I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm actually quite proud of that 19-year-old. He fucking worked it out. So
I remember the scariest point of that first season I did in Val d'Isère was I drove out and I had a little Fiat Panda.
Was it purple?
It was pink.
Was it pink?
Bright pink Fiat Panda. And it did not like us. With me, Juliet, and all of our stuff in the car, it started like you go along the motorway and it would just start getting slower and slower, and it'd be like foot right down on the accelerator, 50, and I'm like, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there. How are we going to do this? What's going to happen when we get to the access road? The car's just not going to make it up the mountain. That was the scariest bit for me. Once we were there, I was like, oh, that's fine. And then you leave it in the big car park, and every time we needed to go down to Borg to get stuff, it always started like more than all the BMWs and the posh cars nearby. My little Fiat, you dig it out, start it, and you're like, seriously, this car's...
Was it a 4x4 one? Because they're quite sought after, aren't they?
Absolutely not a 4x4 one. It was like the cheapest thing I could buy when it was my second car. So I think I must have been about 1920 when I got it, and it was pretty rubbish. I'm genuinely looking back on it, I'm amazed it made it out and back, but I didn't enjoy that journey. It was terrifying.
Oh man, I've done that journey in an old Land Rover Defender, and it was the scariest drive I've ever done
I
because it
bet you
just
were walking
bounces all over the shop. Sorry,
I bet you were walking like a cowboy for weeks. That must be
man,
really uncomfortable.
that was the worst. That was the worst. And then I didn't really ever get to drive it because one of our staff drove it off the side of the road and into a tree.
Oh no.
But like 2 weeks later, so I still haven't got to the bottom of that story, but that's a story for another time. So yeah, so basically we lost my laptop is fucking, I lost some of John Dragon's as well, but luckily I've had enough. Yeah, I know, it's really annoying. I need a new laptop. It's 12 years old, it's fair enough. But yeah, we'd sort of got to talking about I guess it's a standard for freelancers about, choosing whether to go away to do a dangerous thing or whether to go and sit by a beach in the sunshine and save yourself because you've got work coming up. And I guess, yeah, I guess probably a lot of freelancers would have that in mind. For me, probably, I'm not too concerned because I could probably do most of what I do, if I had my arm in a cast, which I hope that doesn't happen. But for you, it's quite a physical, detailed job. So, yeah, weighing up doing something dangerous that you love.
Yeah.
Even in a considered way, you're obviously good at what, you're a good snowboarder. Like, the risks are minimized to an extent.
But I don't think I was ever that good. I just loved it and would just go for it. But I was never someone who was pushing themselves. You see the people who were like doing really, really well in the competitions and things. You see how they were pushing themselves. I don't think I ever had that edge to really go for it, especially sort of from my mid-20s onwards.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a point because my career was something I knew I wanted to do from about the age of 13, 14, watching horror films and loving monster movies. So that was always priority, even when I started snowboarding. And I did spend loads of time. I was the runner at Jim Hensons Creature Shop with my arm in a cast from having a fall on dryslope competition. So at that point, you just kind of pull your hoodie down so no one can see it and keep driving. And that was fine. But then years later, when I started doing the more specialized hair work and had formed a career for myself, that feeling of I can't mess this up was definitely stronger. And I go out to the Brits sort of, into my 30s, I go out to the Brits and enter the half pipe just because there's a lovely half pipe there and I love half pipe and that's the only chance you get.
Yeah.
So I entered, but I wasn't pushing myself. I was never that competitive in that.
But you are kind of, you're a competent snowboarder. You can go snowboarding around the mountain and not, you're not likely to kind of twat yourself because you've done enough snowboarding that it's kind of as easy as walking. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. But then I had one a couple of years ago. I went out with Rob Needham and the whole gang from Hemel Hempstead. They organised a trip to Andorra. And classically, the fall that I had was the most ridiculous, just going through the park, but just having a look at everything to see if I wanted to hit anything. And that was when I just hit a bank of snow and just scorpioned and winded myself massively. And it wasn't even doing anything impressive, but that's what you hear all the time. Not all, but a lot of the falls that people have in seasons is not doing something impressive off an enormous jump. It's catching a bit of ice outside the pub at the end of the night. So there's always that in the back of your head that no matter how long I've done this, there might be just that stupid moment that's the one that ruins the career. Because you're right, everything is really dexterous, really close-up work with my hands. So it's definitely self-preservation over pushing myself, but I still love riding.
I mean, do you still feel like you have to say yes to jobs? Like, this is more, I guess, freelancer chat, but do you still feel like you have to say yes to jobs, otherwise you won't get asked again?
Absolutely. Freelance fear is a massive thing. I've kind of forged a career for myself in a very niche part of the creature effects industry and the film industry, which is, it's a small world.
Yeah.
But of course, you're always going to be like, no one's ever going to employ me again if I say no to this. But I'm trying to be a bit more picky now because I just need a bit more time in between jobs because they are all encompassing. When you add an hour to 2 hour commute to work.
Yeah, brutal.
Quite often doing 10 to 12 hour days. And if you're on set, it can be up to 14. It's long days and quite often 6 day weeks and lots of travel, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love it. But I'm 48 now, and I really feel it when I've done 4 months of a contract like that, and I can't just keep up that energy level. I wish I could, absolutely wish I could, but I can't anymore.
So what's your sort of outlook looking like then? How do you balance that out? Like, do you just do shorter contracts, or you do the contracts but then you take more time off afterwards to recoup?
Definitely trying to take more time off and say, right, when this job finishes, I'd like to give myself a month, because I've got projects that I do at home as well. I've been getting more into sculpting, and I've got a couple of sculpture commissions that I'm in the middle of at the moment. So that's still kind of part of the job, but something I can do from home and sort of be a bit more relaxed about, and that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But when the jobs come in, it's still, you know, this far into my career, someone will go, oh, go on, it's just an advert, go on, you can do it. And your brain's going, I can't say no. I think every freelancer still feels that. I don't know that anyone can fully switch off and go, nope, I'm in control, it's fine.
But then there are the upsides. I mean, I saw, was it on your Instagram recently? Well, actually, having not seen you for years and years, and I was watching the, I think the sequel trilogy, the making of that came with the box set, maybe, something like that, of the Star Wars stuff. And then, you know, it gets on to sort of Chewbacca and the creatures, and then like you pop up. I'm like, holy shit, that's Maria. My kids are like, no way. And I'm like, yeah, she's a snowboarder. She's like, we used to hang out, and they were like, oh my God, she's now the coolest person we know.
Oh,
because they're still like, you know, they still love Star Wars. I mean, you know, and rightly so, of course. And I saw on your Instagram, you know, like you on a red carpet.
That was a proper luxury one. So I spent most of last year, I think when we did the interview, I was still being quite cagey about what I've been working on, but I spent the whole of last year on Gladiator 2 pretty much. We were filming in Ouarzazate in Morocco, and then I lived in Malta for maybe 3 months, and we were filming everything for that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the red carpet thing, we don't normally get to go to premieres as crew.
Do you not?
You know, that's for journalists and the stars and the people that need their photo taken. But we get crew screenings at like multiplex cinemas for the whole crew to go.
Yeah.
Normally on a Sunday morning at about 10 o'clock. So once you've watched the film, everyone goes to the pub and has a massive piss up all day on a Sunday, which is great. But this one, it wasn't because I'd worked on the film that I got a ticket to the premiere. It was because my friend Jimmy organises the premieres in Leicester Square. He sets up all the sets and the lights and the red carpet and everything. And I kind of just asked him months ago, I went, if there's a chance that you might be able to get us a ticket, because I missed the crew screening because I was working abroad at the time. So I was like, oh, if there's a chance. And he managed to. And it was such a treat to just get to walk the red carpet. Yeah. And be completely ignored by paparazzi. There's nothing I love more than walking on a red carpet and you can see all of the photographers going, nah, she's nobody. Yeah, it amuses me so much. I love it.
Well, yeah. But I mean, you know, like someone looking at your Instagram, someone who's maybe kind of wanting to see that job that came across you, they'd look at you and think, wow, you're essentially at the top of your game, aren't you, really? It's quite impressive.
It's a niche world, but I love it. And yeah, I've forged a career for myself that's kept me going for, 30 odd years now, pretty much.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah, and I can't to the listener, we are picking up, because my computer missed out some of our conversations, so there might be a few bits that we've covered already before, but thinking about the fact there's something, I believe that there's something in snowboarders, or certainly people from action sports, who have a slightly different drive to a lot of people, or whether action sports attracts those people with that drive, because it feels like a lot of people from snowboarders, certainly like our crew of people, go on to do some pretty cool stuff and do it at a kind of high level.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And I found a similar thing with all of my clubbing friends from when I was a teenager. We'd all go to the alternative clubs like 3-4 times a week, not drinking, just going out, dancing and hanging out. And loads of them are really big in the gaming industry as well now. I think these kind of, especially with the snowboarding, because it's not a team sport in the way that you've got to commit to it every week, otherwise you're letting other people down. It's kind of you against you trying to do better.
Yeah.
But then you've got this amazing bunch of people who are all wanting you to do better as well. So I feel like there's a lovely environment for that. I don't know exactly what it is about the action sports that has that drive, that they're the kind of people that I don't know. I can't answer that specifically, but I know that you're right. So many people have gone into, whether it's within the action sports world or other careers, that it's amazing looking at our group of friends and where everybody is and kind of popping up on TV and in amazing places. And it makes me really proud.
Yeah.
A bunch of idiots on a dry slope chucking themselves around. And you
This is it. It's it. Yeah, I just did a post on Instagram today. It was Justin Allison had a company called Dope.
Yes.
Before there's another one called Dope now, which I don't know what that's about, but you know, and they just run this ad, and it's like an optician's, you know, like the different letters that get smaller and smaller. And it says, you know, do what the fuck you want to, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just that thing of, and I was just thinking about that, and then the industry was run by all the misfits basically.
Yeah.
And then all the norms saw the money in it and wanted a bit of it, but then they had to come to the misfit stores. And when you said about, like, you know, the crew at the dry slope, if you had like, I just wish we had like a class of like 97 or something photo. And if you looked at them, it would totally be all the misfits. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
In funny clothes and, you know, kind of everyone's got their own individual style thing going on, and everyone's sort of making up as they go along. It would be a fascinating document to have if there was such a thing out there.
I think you're right as well. Everyone kind of found their own way in snowboarding. There wasn't a, you must kick the ball like this, you must do this like this, this is how you do golf, you must always stand like this and do this. Everyone just found their own way in whichever part of snowboarding they like, whether that's, you know, backcountry or in the park or just riding around generally. There's so many different ways to approach it that you don't have individuality joining in with the sport, that everyone's just having a go at things and finding their own way through it.
Well, I think especially on dry slope, because you didn't need to wear outerwear, so you could essentially wear whatever you want.
Yes.
And then it's how people interpret what they want to look like whilst wearing stuff that kind of gives them some protection. But like, you know, a community that goes snowboarding in the mountains, they're going to wear outerwear.
Yes.
Because you need that to stay dry and warm. Whereas at a dry slope, you can pretty much wear whatever you want because you don't need that. So it's
Absolutely.
quite fun then thinking back of like what people used to wear and the sort of the image they would show of themselves.
Absolutely. And the creativity side that you were saying, I remember, I think it was Joe Rackley put something up a couple of weeks ago of my favourite line at, I can't remember if it was Hemel or Hillingdon that the photo was, but it was basically going between, when it's wet weather, you could come off the dry slope, go along the grass, over to the nursery slope, jump across a gap that went back onto the front. It's like just the creativity of, we haven't got a big mountain here, but we found some stupid stuff we can do and interesting lines regardless.
Yeah. So thinking back over, you know, sort of your life, and I guess not your career in snowboarding because you didn't have a career, but kind of you've obviously driven and had a career, but I do think snowboarding will have played a sizable part in your life. Definitely. And who you are. Can you reflect a bit on what it means to you?
For me, it was always fun. Even doing the competitions was fun. I never felt that, I get adrenaline rush and you want to do the best you can at competitions, but it was never a pressured sport. It was a lovely bunch of people. And between that and I used to skateboard as well. And we'd all the snowboarders would be down the skate park at at Hayes every week and various other places. It was just having a bunch of people around you that you could just have fun with.
Yeah.
And that will always stick with me. And I don't think I've found anything to that extent since. And, you know, everyone's moved on and had kids. And there's some people who are still doing the snowboarding every week and the skating. And I don't do that so much anymore. But I have such fond memories of just silly times with no pressure and sleeping in a car and doing competitions and having a brilliant time traveling around the country and then the world later on when you started doing seasons abroad. I wouldn't exchange it for the world. And if anyone was thinking of having a go at snowboarding, just people look at the dry slopes now a bit more and like, oh no, I couldn't do that, and want to go towards the snow domes. But there's something about the bunch of people that you'd find at the dry slopes. And I don't know if that community is as strong now, but I really hope it is, because it was a good bunch, really was.
Okay, that's it. That's where we're going to stop.
apologies if I forget places and dates and names. My memory is definitely not what it was anymore. I'm not the best historian, that's for sure.
When I was listening, I was just listening to what we were doing before, and I couldn't and I'd obviously had a brain freeze about. We're talking about Hillingdon, and I was like, yeah, there's another dry slope. It was up north, and I can't remember the name of it, and I couldn't, and it was Rosendale.
Rosendale. I never rode there, I don't think. I
never rode there either.
I drove past Hill End this August on the way back from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and was like, this is actually a remarkable slope. It's beautiful. But I'd never got to any of the competitions up that far.
No, it's like when you drive past that one on the way to the Alps in northern France, that Noir Nimes or whatever it's called. Yeah, you're just like, oh, there's a dry slope. But like my destination's the Alps, so fuck it.
Yeah. Not even looking twice at it now. Absolutely.
No,
not.
I do. That's something I do need to look into. Actually, is I need to speak to some people that are riding dry slopes still. Like I know Jamie Nichols goes down to Warmwell. There seems to be a scene down there, but I don't know if the traditional Dendex dry slope's still a thing. But Snowflex is definitely a thing, isn't it? Still, I think.
I always see when I go down to see my dad in Cornwall, there's a big one in Plymouth that you see coming off the main road. You go into Plymouth, and sometimes see a few people on it, but I don't know if that scene of kind of the freestyle night with the same gang that turn up, and I don't know to what extent the competitions are going or if they're all happening in the snow domes now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really small one near us. Well, it's near Eastbourne.
Yeah.
And there's like a sort of an adventure playground thing nearby as well. So like we're at the adventure playground with the kids and I was like, let's just pop round there and see what the score is.
Yeah.
And I was asking about lessons for the kids and they were like, yeah, like an hour taster lesson. I think they said it's like 80 quid.
Wow.
Or it was something ridiculous. And I remember I said to them, I was like, that's a taster lesson. That's the lesson that you're going to give to try and get people excited about coming back for more.
Yeah.
And you've already priced everyone out of it. And you're wondering why you're not getting many people booking lessons. Like, it could just be that you're taking the piss because maybe 10 years ago you could charge that and get it.
Yeah.
Because there was more hype about it. But, I want my kids to get into it, but I can't afford to just chuck down like nearly 200 quid or whatever just on a taster lesson to see if they're going to like it.
Yeah.
And hope that your instructors are good enough that they're not going to put off my kids from wanting to do it. Do you know what I mean? That's a big gamble in my mind. I was really shocked.
If it's your kids, you definitely want to find someone from the old gang who's teaching to kind of.
I've spoke to Rob. His son's gonna give him a lesson at Hemel.
Perfect. That's a much better idea. Have you ever had a go on one of those? They've got one in Chiswick indoors. The slopes that are rolling.
Oh, like the Travelator thing.
I've kind of watched people on them, and they also had a sort of a brush surfing place as well, and that looked even worse than Dendex. Like surfing on a spinning brush. You're like, nah, that's not a good idea.
No, just go and fucking do it. Do you know what I mean? There's all these like, but I think they're all designed for skiers, aren't they? Skiing's a different thing. It's all about perfecting your technique and all that bollocks.
That's true. True. We've got a really good skate park just over the road from us. I kind of always look at it and just go, maybe when there's nobody there, I just go and have a look. But I know that I'm not going to bounce in the way that I did before. Like with skateboarding, especially, there's no forgiveness. I was chatting with Scott Nixon about this the other week. I bumped into him at one of those.
Oh, really?
The Red Bull showing of Jono and Gendal's film.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And a load of people there, and that was a lovely little catch-up evening.
I bet that was.
But just the idea of skating now, I know my knees would just explode on the first impact. You just know you're not going to get up from the things that you used to just bounce off and go, oh, that was a bad fall. Anyway, let's carry on. That isn't going to happen now. That's going to be me.
I know. Well, John, who does Dragon Lodge, and Chris Moran have both done their hips in their 40s skateboarding. It's a fucking no-go.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm doing a hip.
No. Self-preservation has completely kicked in on that front.
Although saying that, they have opened a pump track down on the seafront here.
Oh, that sounds like...
I've bought me and the kids BMXs that I need to fix up.
Yeah.
And hopefully like next summer's going to be like BMX bandits down there. And
There was.
I mean, it's rammed full of little kids, but
Yep.
I'm not going to give a shit.
No.
It's going to be like snake or die when I get there.
They had a little one of those down by the wave as well. They've got a little pump
Oh,
track,
yeah.
and I was looking at it going, yeah, I think I could probably do that. And then I was talking myself out of it. Then I decided to go for a surfing lesson and realised how ridiculously I got pummeled, and that was in water. And you just go, hang on a minute, I can't even do this one. What chance have I got skating again? It's not going to happen.
No, I have to do half an hour of like yoga exercises before I go snowboarding now.
Definitely. And kind of in the back of my brain, I wish I'd done more of that when I was riding.
Yeah, imagine.
We all kind of laughed at it. And I think Jilly was doing all these amazing bits in the magazines, and you're kind of looking at the time going, I don't need to do that now. And now looking back, you're like, I wish I'd done more of that when I was snowboarding at the time. I'd probably be in a much better state.
Yeah.
Yeah, weekly yoga in the living room on a Sunday evening now with friends in LA who do yoga courses. I just love it. It's really nice.
Well, I have to do it. In fact, on chatting to Neil McNabb, because I was like, man, you do a lot of yoga. He's like, I wake up in the morning and feel like Tin Man. I have to do that much just so I can like function. And I was like, well, online it looks like you're this mad yoga person. He's like, literally, I've got to do that much so I feel good. Yeah. Otherwise I feel like dog shit. So it's funny, isn't it?
And it is a great one. I mean, I love when I was quite often getting to work early to avoid traffic when I was working at Wembley. And I'd get to work at 7:30 knowing I wasn't starting work till 8 just because it saved me so much time driving. And I'd just get the mat out and do half an hour of yoga. And it's amazing when you do that for like 4 months in a row, you really notice the difference of strength. Because it doesn't feel like it's a killer exercise when you're doing it at any point, but you kind of see the build up really quickly. It's great.
Yeah, I keep having it's routine for me. Finding the routine's difficult. My life's not very routine driven at the moment.
Yeah.
But it'll come. It'll come.
I can imagine.
Right, we're done.
Thank you. Sorry if I was reconstituting things we'd talked about before, but
no, do you know what? Listening.
What order we
actually, it's a really interesting. Actually, I really enjoyed our conversation and listening back to it because I hadn't listened to it since we did it.
Yeah.
I was like, actually, there's loads in this. It's really good.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I don't know. I don't think I'm very good at interviews, so yeah. I hope there's some stuff in there.
Well, as a chat, I think it was nice that we went for a dip first and had a catch up. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just trying to get into it. That was really cool. I was in yesterday. It was fucking freezing.
We're going down to Cornwall. They always do a Christmas Day one at Kingston. As they do in every coastal town. So we'll probably be in, if it's not pelting down with rain and horrendous, we'll probably be in on Christmas morning.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the same for us. If it's not dangerous, we'll be in. 2 of the kids want to come in as well, which is
nice.
Good.
There's something about the organised one at Kingsand Beach. Everyone goes in, everyone does a verse of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas."
Oh, no way.
The people who do it every day swim all the way out to the buoy. The people who don't come straight out. But it's an open invitation to start drinking mulled wine because you've been in the sea. What the hell you want after that?
You can. You know? I mean, that is the thing. Drinking on the beach is nearly always a pleasure, isn't it? Doesn't matter.
Absolutely. You know, I've been in the sea. Shut up! I'm drinking whiskey. Leave me alone.
What song did we pick?
What song did we? I think it might have been Propeller Heads, even though it was on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Because
that was in
The End.
The End.
Escape film. Yeah. So even if it wasn't a snowboard film, that has a massive place in my heart. Plus, I think I used to DJ it all the time when we were at Ramskis in Val d'Isere. It was the piece you put on if you needed a piss because it went on for ages. So if you needed to go, you'd stick that on and then you'd run for it. But it's one of those songs that always reminds me of riding.
So there we go, Maria Cork. Thank you so much for Maria for giving me your time for driving down to Brighton and coming for a swim in the sea. It was an absolute pleasure, and I do apologise for losing part of your interview, but appreciate your time jumping on Zoom. I know you've been super busy, but yeah, I appreciate you. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Maria is a real lifer, and she's a real good person and is doing great things in VFX, which I find, as I said at the top of the show, like big Star Wars nerd. So find that endlessly interesting. Maybe I could shadow you for a day. Actually, I took her inspiration and gave myself a massive wound across my face on on, what is it, Halloween. I quite enjoy a bit of VFX. I think in another life I could have got quite into that. I think there's part of me that definitely likes making people look like they've had bad injuries. So anyway, Happy New Year. I hope you're all doing all right out there. We've had some really nice messages coming in, none less than from Cool Bus Rob, who had an absolute nightmare of a transfer day. So Cool Bus Rob is the head of Cool Bus, and they do airport transfers, and that fog we had over that middle weekend between Christmas and New Year was one of the busiest weekends of the year, and he had an absolute nightmare. But anyway, he then went split boarding kind of late in the day and summited just as the sun was going down, and he was listening to my interview with his friend John Bassett, and he said that it was a very beautiful moment. So yeah, thanks Rob for giving us a shout on that one. I think I've got some other people. So yeah, I need to give a shout out to Tim Russell. We've been talking. He is a Belfast dry slope snowboarder who is now living in Whistler. Big shout out to you. Peter Bowers, who blew his knee out on Christmas Day, I think. That is an unfortunate Christmas present. Ian Trotter, the man from Chalet Snowboard, going to be chatting with him soon. All the other people that have been really kind about the podcast recently. I do appreciate you all. This is such a fun thing to do, and so many people to get to. If you've got any suggestions for people I haven't spoken to yet, then give me a shout at thankyouSnowboarding@gmail.com. You can email me that, or you can find us on Instagram at thankyouSnowboardingPodcast. That would be the two ways to get hold of me. What else? Still very kind support from the Snowboard Asylum. We love you guys. If you want to support grassroots snowboarding, then spend your money with grassroots snowboarding shops. And although the TSA looks like a behemoth, it's not really. It's still a family-run business, and they are snowboarders in it for snowboarding. They also do lots of campaigning for Protect Our Winters and things like that. So support your local snowboard shop, and if you can't support your local snowboard shop, then support the Snowboard Asylum. They will have what you need. Shout out to everyone else that has been looking after me recently. Chris Carr at Canoe for the Oakley goggles. Hopefully Tom at Volcom. I think there might be a packaging coming. Lizzie and Dan at Burton still looking after me. Thank you for the pants that you've just sent over. He heard my cries of distress, and to stop me getting shit for wearing my old denims when I go out to Lax from Tongs Kingsnorth, Dan from Burton kindly sent me a pair of trousers. So nice one. Who else? Oh, and speaking of Tom Kingsnorth giving me shit, he will be out at the Lax Open. Looking forward to catching up with him soon too. And obviously the hookup on Transform gloves, keeping my hands toasty warm. So yeah, I'm off to Lax in a couple of weeks. Well, a week and a half now. Really excited. It's going to be an epic trip. There's a big anniversary of the Lax Open, and really happy to be going. There's a few people on the horizon that I'm going to try and get on the podcast, and then just see what faces turn up and see who we get. But yeah, that's exciting. So yeah, stick around for that. What else is going on? There's obviously snow in the Alps. If you haven't booked your trip yet, then you should definitely be looking at places. I think most of the Alps have got brilliant conditions at the moment. So yeah, get that trip booked. The British Champs, I'm going to be interviewing Stu Brass next week. We're going to be talking about the British Champs, so there'll be more info about that, but that is looming at the beginning of April, I think. And you won't want to miss that. I think that is going to be a solid catch up of snowboard crew. Probably the biggest event for a long time. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be good fun. Probably a bit heavy, but I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. A lot of people catching up, a lot of old faces catching up, a lot of new faces being introduced to the snowboarding community. I think it's going to be a really special event. So yeah, we'll know more about that next week after I've interviewed Stu Brass. What else is going on? I don't know. Just got through Christmas, really. I hope you all had a good Christmas. I hope peace and love is in your heart for the new year. We're thinking about doing some merch. If if you are interested in a Thank You Snowboarding t-shirt, they're going to be pretty cheap, I think, but good quality. We're being looked after by someone from the scene. Ian, oh God, my brain just mush at the moment. Yeah, but an old snowboarder basically who is still doing the business, and he works in merch. He is going to look after us. So we're going to get some pretty premium t-shirts and maybe hoodies knocked up. If you would be interested in that, then if you could just pop us a DM on Instagram or send me an email, thankyouSnowboarding@gmail.com. Show some sort of interest, because I have no idea about this sort of thing. I don't know if anyone's interested in some merch or not. And obviously I don't want a massive box of t-shirts that sit under my desk that annoy me every time I look at them. So yeah, if you are interested, let me know via any of the usual channels. That'd be amazing. And I think that's it for this time. Maria did talk about her tune. It's from the skate movie, The End, which kind of passes the coolometer, as I suppose. You know, it's definitely correct and in the right ballpark. It's Bucky Lazick's section out at the end, and that is a banging section for anything. I think if you're a snowboarder and you don't even watch skating, I think you would still get quite a lot out of that section. So yeah, that's the propeller heads on Her Majesty's Secret Service. They did that with David Arnold. Reminds me of going to see the propeller heads at some sort of MTV based snowboarding event years ago at the Tamworth Snowdome, and they bust us all. I mean, how did anybody organise these things? But anyway, they bust a load of us from the Tamworth Snowdome into Birmingham to a club, and the propeller heads were playing. And I remember it was a brilliant night out, and I think I was sick on the bus on the way back to the Travel Lodge at Tamworth. So I doubt you're listening to this, Mr. Coach Driver, but I do apologise for my stupidity all those years ago. But, you know, if you're going to supply us with free booze and take us to see one of my favourite bands at the time, then spirits are going to be high and booze is going to be drunk, and that's what's going to happen. Anyway, enough rambling. Happy New Year. We will see you next week, Thursday, 10 a.m, when normal service resumes and everybody knows what day of the week it is. Until then, thank you, snowboarding, as ever. Peace.